This is all based on the 10,000 hour rule that I think a lot of people heard of, but have heard the misunderstanding of what the paper actually says. Deliberate practice is really a particular way of practicing that differs a lot from on-the-job training. Because in on-the-job training, what tends to happen more often than anything else is that if there's any learning that happens, it's accidental, and you really only notice things when they go horribly wrong. Because that's what you remember. Those are those war stories. That's what you tell people at meetups. Those are the things that go into your conference talks. Those are the lessons that really stay with you. And I don't think it has to be quite like that. When on-the-job learning, you're focusing on getting the task done, and whatever you learn is great. But in deliberate practice, the goal is not to complete the task. The goal is to stop when things start going wrong, try to figure out why that's happening, and then try again. And this was what Code Retreat was aimed at. That as soon as something goes wrong, everyone can stop and talk about what's happening and try again. And not only is that okay, but that's encouraged. Indeed, that's the point.
Yes. I remember that very clearly. That was always a very hard rule at Coderetreats, that your aim is not to finish. We even used to say that if you finish the task, if you get to the end of implementing Game of Life, you miss the point. Then that wasn't a good round, because a good round ends with you being halfway through, or even not even halfway through, and realize that you got something valuable out of this exercise, right?
Yeah, some of the best sessions I had were ones where we didn't get a single test passing because we were so deep in arguing about an idea, or we were struggling so much to try to figure out how to do something that we thought should be possible, but because none of us had done it before. The old me liked the idea of, if you finish the task and you did it wrong. But I think the kinder, gentler me prefers to say, well, if you finish the task, that's okay. Start again. That part of what you get in exchange for investing all of this uncertainty up front is the breakthroughs happen sooner. The aha moments come sooner. And that's what allows you to then, the next time you get together, you notice a huge difference. Replacing teaching with learning. I didn't realize at the time that Code Retreat was the beginning of me transforming away from a lecturer to someone who facilitates learning. And that's really why something like Lean Poker is important to me. A lot of companies just want to buy talking head at the front of the room, talk for 3 days, spread your pixie dust, and magic will happen. If any client wants me to do that, I'm happy to do that. But it's not really how learning tends to work. That's, again, where deliberate practice becomes really important. People need to have incomplete information and try things anyway. People need to make mistakes and notice it, and maybe even have those things pointed out in a non-judgmental way. And that is what seems to accelerate their learning. Sessions like Lean Poker, I think, really lend some credibility to the idea that learning doesn't happen that way. People need to be allowed to struggle, and they need to feel supported, but they don't need to be directed nearly as much as we tend to think they are.
Let me just give a very quick run through of what Lean Poker is. Basically, the idea with Lean Poker is that I want to create an environment when people can practice incremental delivery and practice how I can deliver small pieces of code, push it into production, and then react to what happens. And the way we do this is that we get together, we form teams, and each team is going to be a kind of a startup on its own, right? And each of these startups are trying to build a poker bot that is trying to play poker throughout the day. And these bots are actually playing right after the teams are formed. So no one has even checked out their code. There is a starter bot that does something very simple. No one even touched their code yet, but these bots are already playing, and they are playing every few seconds. So what ends up happening is all these teams go, oh, now we have to quickly do something because we need to get ahead of the other teams. So what is the smallest thing that I can do? One tip, if you go to an poker, try and get something out in the first 30 seconds. This sounds aggressive. 30 seconds right after you checked out of the code, you're going to deploy something. And this is the challenge for you. Can you do that? Can you build something in 30 seconds that actually starts beating the other bots? And hint, it is possible. And the whole day is about that. Get more and more of these iterations out and get feedback on it and see how the bots are playing, figuring out where you lost money, where you gained money. What is it that you're doing well? How am I going to deploy a new version? Should I deploy it and then just wait? Should I look at the results? Should I do an A/B test? All these questions are just happening there. And like one thing I can promise to anyone who is coming to Lean Poker, you are going to be tired as hell. Every single time we organize Lean Poker and I ask people, do you want to go out for drinks after this one? Everyone is like, are you kidding me? One of the things that inspired Lean Poker, I was doing this Coderetreats, and there was one feedback that I kept hearing over and over and over again. This is all beautiful in theory, but how am I going to do that work? Because we are not finishing here. On one hand, we are saying that deliberate practice is when your goal is not to finish. But at the same time, people were like coming away from Coderetreats with the mindset of, oh yeah, but we didn't finish anything. So how am I going to sell that I'm not going to finish things?
Right.
I wanted to have a way of deliberate practice that shows people that doing the right things, it's not a theory. If you want to really seriously react to your customers' needs, what you really need to do is to iterate quickly. You need to do the right things instead of hacking things together. And I think it really achieves that. I really don't have to speak that much because people just intuitively understand what to do in order to get ahead of the rest of the team.
And I really like the idea of creating an environment where there's space to do deliberate practice, but where there is still a goal. An artificial sense of urgency that's just enough that gives people a feeling like my decisions are important. Mm-hmm. And so I think it provides a nice balance between deliberate practice and let's call it an industrial strength environment. Not because I think an industrial strength environment is the best place to learn, but I think that having that bit of artificial urgency is a nice thing to alternate with polish the stone until it's perfect. I heard the same things. I heard people saying, yeah, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. Even though my answer to that question was always, right, you don't know what you're going to do with this, except that in the next month or so, you're going to try to do something. You're not going to be sure if it's going to work. You're going to take something that you learned from today. It's going to make what you do easier, and you're not even going to notice it happen. And that's the dirty secret of deliberate practice. Programmers in particular, especially younger programmers, they have this idea that they can read their way to proficiency, and then they can have this orderly way of learning things, and then they'll be able to apply that learning right away. And so there's always this expectation, just like you described it in the feedback that you got in the closing circle. Like, how am I going to use this? I don't know. I just know you're going to use it. Because it's expensive to go to conferences, I think what's good about that is that it opens people up to alternative ways of learning and learning different things. And it's very hard to know, just looking at your own learning, that now is not the time to go to a conference. Now is not the time to be flooded by 12 new ideas. Now is the time to find the one or two things that you haven't taken the time to practice and practice them. Things like Coderetreat, like Lean Poker, or even the thing that I'm going to talk about, which I call casino technique. What they allow us to do is to actually activate that learning, and that really boils down to some form of deliberate practice. Trying it, not worrying about whether you're going to finish the task, stopping when you make a mistake and trying again, stopping when it feels weird and asking a question. So now the big question always becomes, sure, JB, but when? When am I supposed to do that? We're already being told to do more with less, blah, blah, blah. And this is sort of the moment in the training class where I can sort of look around the room and say, okay, are there any managers listening? Because let's make sure they can't, if there's at least one manager in the room, that they'll play like putting their fingers in their ears, like, oh, it's okay, I can't hear you. The answer is not comfortable. You have all the slack you need to practice deliberately. You have all the slack you need to use your day job tasks as fuel for learning. But it's not socially acceptable to show everyone how much slack you have, because we're supposed to be as efficient as possible, and we're supposed to do more with less and all this kind of stuff. And so often what ends up happening is either that all this stuff is driven into the shadows, and I'll talk about how to do that in a moment, or there's one heroic person, a team lead, a technical lead, a manager, who can shield the group from outside view, which will allow them an opportunity to practice deliberately, openly within their group, but out of the way of observers who are standing there with their arms crossed, tapping their foot, impatiently waiting for results. It's a theory of constraints idea. It's recognizing that when you're not the bottleneck, your production rate doesn't have to be maximized. So, okay, how do you actually do it? First is to make peace with the fact that you have slack. You know you have slack because if you make a mistake and the company doesn't implode, That means you had Slack. Perfect. Okay, now that we agree that you have Slack, how do you use it? And I call it casino technique. If you go with your friends to the casino, then as you are walking towards the casino door, as you're about 100 meters away, you reach, you take out a wallet, you take out 200 euro, you hand your wallet to your friend, and then you say to your friend, look at me in the eye. No matter what I do, no matter what I say, no matter how much I scream, do not let me have that wallet. This is my gambling money. I'm going to walk into the casino, and when this gambling money is gone, I stop gambling. Do not let me have access to my credit cards. Don't even let me have access to my phone. I don't want to be tempted. This is as much as I'm willing to lose. And when I'm done, whether that's in 30 minutes or 8 hours, then my night is over. And then as you walk out of the casino, once you're 100 meters away from the door, then it's safe to take your wallet back. And that's just a funny way of saying, start with what is an amount of time that I'm willing to waste, lose, get nothing from. Not because your intention is to get nothing from it, but because that freedom is necessary for learning to happen, for deliberate practice to happen. That's the code retreat model, right? The code retreat model is you have 45 minutes to waste, go waste it. Except, of course, you're not going to waste it. You're going to practice something in particular. You might learn one thing, you might learn 3 things you don't know. All you know is that at the end of 45 minutes, if it's not going well, you never have to speak about it again. And this is what I encourage people to do. Start with 30 minutes at the end of every task or at the beginning of every task. You know, if you have a task that takes 3 days, I don't think your manager is going to scream at you if it takes 3 days and 30 minutes. That's an example of the slack that I mentioned. And so you start with 30 minutes. So maybe at 30 minutes at the beginning of every task where you try to do something new and see if it helps you. And if you're struggling at the end of 30 minutes, you just say, oops, I guess that didn't work. Let me throw that all away. And now I'll finish this task the old way, the way that I already know how to do. And at least I spent 30 minutes trying. Another way to do it is add 30 minutes at the end of the task. Try refactoring, try cleaning up before moving on, try writing an extra test, something that you can practice that you know is going to help you or that you think is going to help you. And again, at the end of 30 minutes, like you've already finished your task, at the end of 30 minutes, then you can make this simple decision. Do I keep the things that I did or throw them away? If I throw them away, that's okay. I'll be better prepared next time. And wait for angry emails. Wait for that unexpected one-on-one meeting with your manager. Wait for that look on people's faces like they're wondering why it's taking you so long. And those probably won't happen. You know, there are a lot of things that we teach, incremental design, evolutionary design, continuous delivery, that our clients tend to see them as luxuries instead of necessities, even though in many environments, they are actually not luxuries. They are really things that they do need to learn, which is why I'm in the building in the first place. The reason why they're talking to me at all is because somebody somewhere recognizes that this is not merely a luxury anymore, that we really are experiencing this kind of competitive pressure, that we really are at the point where we can't change anything anymore, and yet we need to add features. And when we're talking about such huge scales, weeks, months of planning to deliver a release of the product or something, that we can get into a whole bunch of arguments about which techniques are useful, which ones aren't. Programmers are very good at arguing about things before they try them and need to be pushed to just try them and see what happens. And what I really am looking forward to is the way that Lean Poker makes these things immediate necessities, or even if they're not necessities, the competitive advantage is obvious. Anyone who understands what you just described about how you start with Lean Poker can get it, that the first team to do something other than the default behavior of all the poker playing bots is going to have a huge competitive advantage. And it's tangible. You can see it, you can feel it, you know that it's there. All the things that you try to do, like, hey, should we write some tests? Hey, should we refactor? Hey, should we clean up before moving on? Hey, should we push this to production and then refactor a bit more and push again? These are no longer idle speculation. You can actually try to answer the question, was this useful or not? Because you'll know in 10 minutes whether it was useful or not. When you see the graph going up instead of down, that's all the feedback you need.
Exactly. And to be fair, people would think in a day you can't make a huge mess. You can. Like, there are 2 kinds of teams that end up losing at Lean Pokers very often. One thing is that tries to do everything cleanly when you are actually doing too much TDD in a sense.
Yep.
And the other kind of team that loses, that does no TDD and does not focus on code quality. And the reason is, like, you have to find a balance. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about Lean Poker is this balancing act between where do I do things the right way and where are the things where actually the right way is to cut corners.
Yeah, this technical debt thing, the actual technical debt, the idea that when we implement or when we release features incrementally, by definition, we're not going to design it the way we want to from the beginning because we can't predict the future. And then we have to pay down that debt over time, right? Not just, oh, we cut corners, but more like this is what it means to deliver incrementally. To deliver incrementally means that sometimes it makes more sense to do this instead of what's good in the long term, and to make that a deliberate choice. I'm really interested in, like, the context that we tend to work in is one where there's all this emotional and organizational baggage that stops us from doing the right thing, from doing the thing that we want to practice, that we want to get better at. And we haven't been writing tests. We haven't been refactoring. We haven't been cultivating the design. We haven't allowed ourselves to change the code just because it would be better. And one of the downsides to the training courses is we create this artificial environment where you can do all those things, but then you lose the urgency of shipping features. What I'm really looking forward to is the idea that Lean Poker is going to give us a glimpse of the future. Like, this is how we could actually work. Where, as you say, we do need to balance polishing the stone with getting something out. We do need to accept some, suboptimal design because, well, we need to get it out in production. Then we can clean up before moving on. Or we can make a conscious decision whether to clean up before moving on, instead of what we're doing now, which is everyone looking at each other saying, geez, I wish we could have done a better job. Oh, well.
I hope you enjoyed this shortened version of my discussion with jbrains. If you did, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell so that you find out about my future videos on engineering leadership and effective software delivery. If you would like to watch the full hour-long version of this discussion, you can click here, or if you want to watch another video, click here. See you next time.